On a dusty corner street in Amarillo, Texas, where the pavement cracked under the scorching summer sun, and the paint on the grocery store sign had long since peeled, lived two twin girls. The slightly older one was named Emma, and the younger was Ellie. The sisters were just 13 years old, slender in build, their long hair tied with old rubber bands, wearing worn-out plastic sandals, their sun-kissed faces glowing with an oddly radiant light, as if, deep within, they were holding on to something fragile yet beautiful. No one truly paid attention to the girls until they started to sing. Before we continue following the extraordinary journey of Emma and Ellie, if you also believe that a person's true worth lies not in their circumstances or appearance, but in their resilience and unyielding passion, please like and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can spread these inspiring stories to even more people. Now, let's return to the story, where miracles are still waiting ahead. Every afternoon after school, Emma and Ellie would stand side by side on the sidewalk, right in front of a bakery that had shut down since last winter. Ellie held an old wooden guitar with only 3 strings left and a chipped body. Emma carefully placed a small portable speaker, bought second-hand from a flea market, on top of a cardboard box. When everything was ready, the two sisters nodded gently to each other and began to sing. Emma's voice was high and airy, like a soft breeze. Ellie's was lower, tender, like a thin blanket on a cold night. When their voices blended, the sound wasn't loud or technical, but it held something rarely heard anymore: sincerity. They weren't singing to perform. They were singing to survive, because across the city, in a damp rented room on the 2nd floor, their mother, Marie, lay bedridden, battling late-stage heart disease. The pain kept her from working. Monthly medication costs were more than they could afford, and so their voices became their livelihood. Each song was a hope, a whispered prayer carried on the wind. But not everyone listened. Many passers-by frowned. Some younger ones giggled and pulled out their phones to record. One video had been posted online with a mocking title, "The Instant Noodle Duet." One comment read, "They sing terribly but act like angels dropped into the slums." The sisters didn't read those comments, and if they did, they would probably just smile faintly, because they didn't sing for mockers. They sang for their mother, for life, for other forgotten children. One March afternoon, as the spring sun began to tint the pavement gold, an elderly woman stopped walking. She wore a faded ash-colored floral dress, a wide-brimmed hat shading half her wrinkled face, and held a chipped wooden cane. She said nothing, just stood there amidst the rush of people and listened. Emma started first, an old song, "You Are My Sunshine." Ellie followed with a slow, gentle guitar accompaniment. No background music, no staging, just 2 honest voices rising from the heart of the street. The old woman began to cry. When the song ended, she stepped forward and took out an old embroidered handkerchief from her pocket, gently wiping her eyes. "You girls sing like someone just touched my heart. My daughter used to sing this to me when she was alive. Hearing it again felt like hearing her voice once more." Then she pulled out a $10 bill, and after a moment of hesitation, reached into her purse for 5 more. "I'm not rich, but you two, take this. Thank you for reminding me of a love I thought I'd forgotten." Emma started to decline, but Ellie gently squeezed her sister's hand and shook her head. Together they said, "Thank you, ma'am." That night, the 3 of them shared the best meal they'd had in weeks. A bit of crusty bread, warm chicken soup, and medicine for their mother. Marie gave a faint smile and nodded weakly as Emma recounted the afternoon's events. "We sang again today, Mom," Ellie whispered, "and someone actually heard us." Outside, the city was still noisy, the dust still swirled. But in that tiny room, beneath a dim yellow light and their mother's heavy breathing, something had begun to grow, bit by bit, not a dream, but a belief that a voice, if it comes from the heart, can touch anyone. Talent Week at Wilson Middle School arrived as quietly as every other year. But this time, there was one big difference. Instead of a plastic trophy or a gift card, the top prize would be a summer scholarship to the Amarillo City Music Academy, awarded to the most impressive performance. On Monday morning, the announcement came through the school loudspeakers, the principal's raspy voice echoing, "If any student wishes to sign up to perform, please write your name on the list outside the school office." Before this Wednesday, the classroom erupted. Everyone started chattering. Some planned a hip-hop routine. Others were prepping piano solos, and a few even suggested doing a TikTok remix act just for fun. Emma and Ellie said nothing. The sisters sat quietly at the back of the room, copying notes into their worn notebooks. No one asked them anything. No one invited them to join a group. A few glances were cast their way, followed by smirking chuckles. Are those poor girls seriously signing up? Maybe they'll bring their broken guitar on stage as a comedy prop. But that afternoon, after school, it was Ellie who took her sister's hand and led her to the bulletin board. The black marker was almost dry. Dozens of names already crowded the sheet. Emma hesitated. What if they laugh at us? Ellie squeezed her hand tighter, her eyes fearless. Sis, we're not singing to get applause. We sing because Mom is still breathing with every note we send into the world. And then, at the bottom of the list, a small, shaky line appeared, tilted slightly from trembling hands. Emma and Elly Sanchez, Duet a cappella. That very evening, the sign-up sheet was photographed and posted in the class group chat. The top liked comment read, "Can't wait for the street karaoke act." The next morning in the hallway, a girl mocked Ellie's voice with exaggerated mimicry. Another group pretended to play guitar using rulers. But this time, the sisters didn't bow their heads. They walked straight ahead, eyes fixed forward. Because that night, after their mother had fallen asleep from exhaustion, Emma and Ellie practiced under the dim light of a desk lamp, accompanied only by the ticking of a clock and the wind tapping at the window. The song they chose was Amazing Grace, not to impress, but because it was the song their mother used to hum when she was tired, wanting to comfort her daughters. Rehearsal day arrived. In Wilson School's large auditorium, the stage sound system was ready. The dance group blasted electronic beats. A boy's drum pad solo earned cheers. Emma and Ellie were listed last. The music teacher, a woman in her 50s with a stern gaze, asked quickly, "Do you two have a backing track?" Ellie shook her head. "No, ma'am, we'll be singing a cappella." A few students below snickered. "They're singing dry? You've got to be kidding." Emma looked at Ellie. Then the sisters nodded to each other. In Emma's hand was a small notebook, the one where they'd written down the lyrics to their mom's lullabies since they were 8. They stepped onto the stage. No colored lights, no props. Just two little girls with simple braids and eyes that glowed like tiny candles. The wind. And then Ellie began, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. Her voice was soft, unadorned, but gentle like the breath of early winter. Emma joined in, her tone higher, graceful like the first light touching an old, tiled roof at dawn. The laughter in the crowd faded. A teacher who had been typing on her phone stopped. A student chewing snacks paused mid-bite. A boy lifted his head. From a sketch pad, no one said a word. They simply listened. As the final line rang out was blind, but now. I see. The auditorium fell into absolute silence. Not the silence of boredom, but the kind that comes when something has touched the heart in a place long left untouched. The music teacher slowly stood up, her eyes red. I never thought I'd hear that song. Like that. In a place like this. Ellie looked down at Emma. For the first time, the sisters smiled on stage. Not because they were accepted, but because they knew they had been heard. The official performance day took place that Friday, in the main auditorium of Wilson School, an old hall, now decorated splendidly for the special event. A red fabric banner hung above the stage, reading, "Wilson's Got Talent, let your light shine." Chairs were lined up neatly in rows. The stage was covered in a blue carpet, and the floodlights, rigged up a month ago, had been tested 3 times. Parents, teachers, a few local journalists, and representatives from the Amarillo City Music Academy were all present. Emma and Ellie waited backstage, wearing 2 simple dresses their mother had sewn from repurposed old clothes, one cream white, the other pale blue. Around each of their necks was a tiny music note pendant, the only birthday gift their mother had ever saved up to buy. In Ellie's hand was their familiar 3-string guitar. Emma still held the small notebook, the one filled with handwritten lyrics like quiet letters to their mother. Backstage, other acts were being called one by one. Cheers and claps erupted as the hip-hop dance crew finished. A boy earned wild applause after his energetic beatbox routine. From time to time, someone in the audience would shout out a name, wave excitedly, or cheer with joy. Emma looked down at her frayed canvas shoes. Ellie turned to her and smiled. "We don't need anyone to shout our names, as long as Mom hears. So that's enough." Then the MC's voice echoed. "And now for our next act, a vocal duet. No backing music, no special lights, just voices. Please welcome Emma and Ellie Sanchez." A few murmurs rose from the audience. Some phones were already recording, not to preserve a memory, but in anticipation of a cringeworthy moment worth sharing. The 2 girls stepped out. Under a plain white spotlight, the 2 children stood still. On the wide stage, no props, no backup performers, just 2 voices and an old song their mother once hummed in a damp little apartment room. "This is for our mom," Emma said softly into the mic, then nodded to Ellie, and the singing began. "Amazing. Grace, how sweet the sound." Ellie's voice floated like morning mist, steady and soft. Emma joined in moments later, her voice rising like light slipping through the cracks of an old window at dawn. No background music, no effects. But every line rang out as if it came from the deepest place in every listener's heart. The principal, who had been checking off the performance list, suddenly stopped. A math teacher gently set down her coffee cup, eyes fixed on the stage. A young mother who had been soothing her child drew the baby closer, as if hoping they'd stay still to listen. No one expected that silence. No one thought the same girls who'd been teased would command a packed room into quiet reverence, like walking into a sacred space. When the final line came was blind. But now, I see. Emma and Ellie didn't look at the crowd. They looked toward the dark end of the auditorium, where a thin woman in a headscarf sat quietly, their mother, Marie. She had just arrived, stepping off a bus after an emergency treatment, barely strong enough to walk in. Not for the prize, but because their voices were the only thing that still made her feel alive. She placed a hand over her chest. No tears, no words, just a gaze, one that had just witnessed a miracle. The silence held for a few seconds longer. Then, a single clap rang out, 1, then 2. Then the entire auditorium erupted, not with rowdy applause, but with a sound born of awe, respect, and deep emotion. A suited man on the judging panel stood up abruptly. That wasn't technique. That was truth. And I had forgotten music could still do that. As the applause in the auditorium died down, Emma and Ellie bowed their heads gently and quietly stepped backstage. There were no comments, no exchanged glances, only a profound stillness, the kind that follows when hearts have been truly moved. Behind the curtain, the principal herself approached the 2 girls. She didn't speak right away. She simply placed a hand on Emma's shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. "You girls just did something no one else in this entire show has ever done. I believe your mother must be very proud." Emma nodded softly, her eyes drifting to the back of the auditorium, where a frail woman with a faded headscarf was wiping her tears with an embroidered handkerchief stitched with her daughter's, Amy's. But before the sisters could leave the backstage area, a woman in a long brown coat wearing a name badge approached them. Her voice was low, calm, and refined, the kind of voice one might expect from someone used to speaking in front of crowds. "Excuse me, I'm Clara Jensen, director of the scholarship program at the Amarillo City Youth Conservatory. I came today just to see a few of my former students perform, but I couldn't leave without speaking to you 2. Emma and Ellie glanced at each other, the emotion of their performance still lingering in their eyes. "Could you come to our studio next?" "Saturday?" Clara continued. "I'd like to record a test track. No makeup or special prep needed, just the two of you and the song you most want to sing." Ellie pressed her lips together. "Can we bring our mom with us?" Clara looked at both of them for a moment, then nodded. "If your mother is the reason you sing like that, I believe our studio would be honored." That Saturday, the city bus stopped in front of a low white building nestled quietly in Amarillo's artist district. Clara was waiting at the door, holding a cup of hot coffee, standing beside a sound engineer with large headphones draped around his neck. Inside the studio, the walls were covered with acoustic foam arranged in honeycomb patterns. Soft amber light filled the space, and a large microphone stood ready in the quiet room. No audience, no stage, just real sound and real feeling. Clara gestured gently. "Don't worry. Just imagine you're singing to your mom at home." Emma and Elly stepped in. The same old guitar. The same familiar notebook. This time they chose "You Are My Sunshine," the song their mother used to hum when wind howled at the windows and dinner was just thin soup and crusty bread. Their voices rose, gentle, deep, unpretentious. Each word wrapped in memory and love. The sound engineer, a man with salt and pepper hair, sat motionless behind the control board. When the song ended, he spoke only one sentence. "I don't know who you girls are, but I just heard something this studio hasn't heard in years." 3 days later, Clara returned with a pale blue envelope bearing the seal of the Amarillo Conservatory Admissions Council. Inside was an official invitation. Emma and Elly had been accepted into the summer scholarship program for talented youth from underprivileged communities. "The program only accepts 2 students each year," Clara explained. "And this is the first year. Both slots are going to one family." Marie, the girl's mother, couldn't find words. She simply held her daughter's hands tightly, then placed trembling kisses on their foreheads, as if afraid it would all vanish if she moved too quickly. That night, in their tiny room under the glow of a worn-out yellow lamp, Elly wrote in her notebook, "Mom, I think we're about to sing in a place where people will truly listen, but I'll still sing to you first, because if it weren't for you, my voice would have no reason to rise." Summer arrived with blazing sunshine over the red-tiled rooftops of Amarillo. Within the grounds of the music conservatory, the sound of pianos flowed from practice rooms, blending with soaring vocal exercises, each note like a bird in flight. Through the air of classical discipline, among the voices that had been professionally trained since childhood, Emma and Elly entered like 2 little sparrows among a flock of swans. The sisters still wore simple fabric dresses and old shoes patched up with glue. While other students chatted about Broadway musicals and international choirs, Emma quietly held onto her little notebook. Elly clutched her guitar, as if it were the last familiar thing in an unfamiliar world. In vocal class, when the instructor asked, "Do you know the difference between soprano, alto, and mezzo?" Elly simply shook her head. In music theory class, when a classmate asked, "Want to try parallel minor harmonies?" Emma only gave a small, polite smile. In those first days, Emma would glance over her shoulder whenever she sang, as if afraid someone might laugh. Elly often sang with her head down, as if apologizing for not being good enough. But they didn't give up. In the evenings, while others practiced techniques in air-conditioned studios, the sisters sat outside on the dormitory porch under a dim yellow light, rehearsing by singing to each other. No microphones, no sheet music, just memories and love as their soundtrack. One night, Clara Jensen, the woman who had brought them into the conservatory, came to visit. She brought a bag of pastries and 2 beginner music theory books, but when she saw Elly quietly singing and strumming for her sister, Clara didn't enter. She simply stood on the steps and listened. The next morning, she left a small note. "In Emma's desk drawer, you can learn technique later, but your heart is already singing the right way." The final recital of the summer session arrived, a grand event held at Willow Hall, a century-old wooden auditorium where many famous Voices had debuted. The audience seats were full. Stage lights went through their last test. Every performance was recorded and live-streamed for parents, donors, and partner institutions. Emma and Elly were the second-to-last act. Before them were flawless Italian arias, polished Broadway pieces. As their names were called, whispers echoed. Some were curious, others skeptical. Those poor girls. What can they possibly do? The sisters stepped onto the stage. The spotlight wasn't harsh. It seemed to soften, as if waiting for something gentle to unfold. Emma looked down to the third row, where their mother sat, clutching a scarf, her lips trembling with emotion. Marie had fought through the entire month to be there. Though frail, she wouldn't miss it for anything. Ellie took a deep breath. This song isn't to prove anything, but to remind us. Some voices aren't meant to impress. They exist to hold together a heart that's about to break. And then they sang, "You Are My Sunshine," once again. But this time the harmony was rawer, more aching. Emma's voice was memory. Ellie's voice was a prayer. Every lyric carried the weight of childhood, of afternoons singing on sidewalks, of prescription bottles, of a mother's cough, and the light in her eyes every time they sang. When the final line rang out, "Please don't take my sunshine away," no one spoke. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then, the entire hall rose to their feet. A conductor quietly removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. A student who had once mocked them bowed his head and clapped slowly. Clara stood at the back of the hall, leaning against the door frame, her eyes wet. Sometimes you don't have to come from somewhere special. You just have to sing with your heart, and someone will hear you. 6 months later, on a youth talent television interview, the host asked Emma, "What do you think brought you here?" Emma looked into the camera and smiled gently. A mother who never stopped believing in her daughter's voices, even when the world turned its back. And so the story of Emma and Elly came to a close, not with a perfect song, but with a sincere melody that found a place in people's hearts. If this story moved your heart, please share it. Because somewhere out there, someone may still be singing, just waiting for one person to listen. From a dusty street corner with a 3-string guitar to a stage that made an entire hall fall silent. If this song touched your heart, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support gives us strength to keep telling these quiet, meaningful human stories. See you again on the next journey, where music and faith still burn bright.